Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 497.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because here's what I know about you. I know that you're out there, you're building your business, you've got your idea, you are making it happen. And in fact, you're so wrapped up in it, you're probably making nothing else happen. Meaning, what is going to be your exit strategy one day? What are you building today? Something that is outside of your business that allows you to know you're eventually going to get there, wherever there is. Each one of us have a different there, but you know, like I know, at some point, you have to transition. At some point, you must be building something else. At some point, you got to diversify your time, your interest, your money. You've got to make sure that these things happen. And what's really interesting is that you know, like I know, that yes, we love real estate, but there are many different ways to even diversify that portfolio, maybe even so much so that it's outside the country you live in. Now, I know that the majority of you are listening to me in the great United States of America, but many of you, in fact, an overwhelming lots of you, are actually outside of the U.S. And what about the idea of other countries? Now, for those of you who are Americans, that could be a bit of a challenge. You're like, what? How do I make that happen? Whereas others of you, you're thinking, man, of course other countries. It's the only thing that makes sense. Well, I have with me today someone who has not only been investing in other countries, but living in other countries and has done so for literally decades. And dare I say that what you are going to learn today is going to help you diversify, if not your portfolio, at least your thought process and your mind, because I am talking about none other than Mike Cobb. He is the co-founder and CEO of ECI Development. You may remember him from episode 139, for those of you who have been around that long, and he's back. Why? Because when it comes down to it, this game of real estate, you continue to grow, you continue to become bigger, better, badder, and most importantly, he's going to share more information with you and I today about the ability, what you may not be thinking about that you actually have. He's actually been named one of the 100 outstanding CEOs in Central America. He has spent 22 years working in Central and South America, and 14 years of those, he was actually in there, meaning living, him, his family, all that stuff. So I don't think we could have a better person to listen to right now. So let's break out those pads, those notepads, those bookmarks, whatever it is that you use to take notes. And let's get ready to listen, learn, and love Mike Cobb. Mike, how you doing?
Jay, thank you, man. I need to take you around to give my introductions more often. That was phenomenal.
Well, no, you go lots of places, my friend. That's a lot of travel. I can only imagine how many miles you might have. I can only imagine.
Well, you know, United has given me the Million Miler Award, and I fly them and other airlines. So yeah, I'm definitely putting some sky miles out. Yeah,
he's in the That's great. Are you ever going to be able to use all those miles? Like ever? No.
Not really, probably. No.
It's like, they just know me by name. I know all the pilots. It's just how it
pretty
works.
much. Yeah. On some of the routes, I actually do know the flight attendants. So, right. And they know me, but, Jay, thank you for that introduction. And just a quick question. You said I was episode 139. Do you know how long ago that was? Because I remember meeting you in Belize. I don't know. I'm going to say 5, 6, 7 years ago, but I could be off on that. How long ago was it? Do you know?
Woo! You know what? Let's see if I can figure that out while we talk, because I don't know off the top of my head for sure.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. No, just curious. I mean, it was like, wow, you knew the episode number. That was pretty good.
We do try.
Yeah, indeed. Well, you actually succeed, which is better than trying. So, and I'm guessing, listening to your intro, I've been following you for a long time. I love what you do. I love the training you give. You really bring extremely relevant, important information to the marketplace that others don't do. And even if they do, I don't think they do it nearly as well as you do. And so, your listeners are very, very fortunate to be tapped into you as a resource. So, again, thank you for what you're doing for your listeners as well, man. I'm really a big fan.
Thank you for the kind words. And
absolutely,
man. And I know we're going to we'll eventually be, we can't go without mentioning Belize because it's land of the absolute best key lime pie on the planet. But at the end of the day, what are you up to now? Yes. What are you up to now? What's been going on?
Well, we started ECI 22 years ago, but actually it's interesting. My very first rental property, which is obviously near and dear to your heart and those listening, my very first rental property I bought in my early 30s. I think I was 32 or 33 years old. Well, let me think. It was 1994, so I was exactly 30 years old. I was born in 64. So I was 30 years old. I bought my very first rental property on Ambergris Caye, Belize, which is incredible. Yeah. And, and I didn't really understand anything about, rental management and cash flow and that kind of stuff. I just went down there because I thought it was, on vacation. It was fun. And I said, man, I want to come back here a lot. And so I bought a condo and, went there quite a bit. But when I wasn't there, put it in a rental program. And it did pretty well. It didn't knock it out of the park or anything, but it did pretty well. But what we saw was this incredible opportunity to do more of it. And in 96, we started our development company, and I lived in Belize for 6 months in 98 and 99. And then we bought a huge piece of property in Nicaragua and lived there from 2002 to 2016. But in the interim, we bought additional properties in Costa Rica, Panama. And the big news, Jay, is that right now we are closing a deal in Argentina for a vineyard community not somewhere, but about an hour and a half south of Mendoza, in the Mendoza province in the foothills of the Andes. So lots of good things going on. And we continue to grow because, we see the consumer need. We see people who want to, live and invest overseas. They want to own property, whether it's a vacation property or, an investment property, or in some cases, maybe about a third of the time, people actually wanting to live, full time as retirees. Or what's really exciting, Jay, and we're seeing more and more of this, are people who we're calling digital nomads. These are people who can work from anywhere because they work from a laptop and a phone, and they're not place bound, right? I mean, they're truly free, and we're seeing more and more people who are picking up and moving different places because they can, and having a whole different lifestyle. I lived overseas. I raised a family, overseas for 14 years, and quality of life is wonderful, and the experience to bring up kids in a different culture, it's interesting. I mean, it's wonderful in so many ways that we don't have time to go into. But there's the short synopsis of what's been happening to me over the last few years.
Got it. So you bought you bought the world. No, I got it. Totally understood. But you did mention something that I think about for my kids that I know that I had the benefit of because military family. And I got the privilege of growing. It was mostly Europe. So that's what I got to see. But that was my normal. And being able to see other countries, I think, is huge for everybody. But you brought up something that I think is really important for everyone to hear. It seems as though that there's a trend of globalization, where everybody's becoming more of a global citizen. Like, it's easier for us to, obviously, to share information today because the internet exists. And now we're beginning to realize, well, I don't have to be where I am in order to still earn the income I do. So is there any particular trend that you see that's driving this trend, or your amongst your customers, or the people who are desiring to diversify by going outside of maybe their primary home country?
Oh, absolutely. And it's probably for the most part people in their it's interesting. It kind of bifurcates. So it's people in their 20s who haven't settled down yet, who don't have families, or it's people in their 50s, maybe early 60s, who have, families that are out, kids that are out, but the grandkids haven't come along yet. So we kind of see this bifurcation there. But what's interesting is we're beginning now to see more and more people with children who are picking up and moving overseas. That's the relatively new trend in this marketplace, or people in their 30s and 40s with kids who are beginning to pick them up and move them. And so if I had to identify the new trend, that's it. The old trend was the 20s and the 50s, because they didn't have the kid factor. But more and more people realize that, and I'll just give you an example. My kids, they went to a German school. I have two daughters. They went to a German school. So they went to school in Spanish all day. And then they learned German as their bilingual, because it was a bilingual school. German was their second language, right? And then we spoke English at home. And so what was great was, the girls went to school in Spanish. That was the key part of it, right? We wanted them to be principally educated in Spanish because we were going to speak English at home. And then German was just sort of the bonus language, right? Had there been a Chinese school, I can tell you the girls would have been in the Chinese school because, Spanish, Chinese, and English. If you know those three languages, the world is your oyster. So, raising kids overseas has become easier and easier. There are plenty of American schools. Costa Rica has a country day school for people that know that in the States. There are even Waldorf schools and Montessori programs outside the U.S. now. So there are a lot of, traditional education. There are Christian schools. There are Catholic schools. I say Christian meaning Protestant. There are Catholic schools, both bilingual or, bilingual English, Spanish, or English, whatever the native language of the country is. But also, again, the opportunity to put your kids in bilingual programs that aren't your native language. So they end up, picking up a third language, which is kind of cool too. So
now, when it comes down to it, though, would you say that the individuals that are traveling with their kids, are they traveling? Is this a vacation? Are they moving? Is this my second home? What is the general purpose that you're finding that people are actually going, okay, it's time to consider getting, being more global?
Yeah. Again, there's the 20-somethings, they're moving around a lot. They're not buying property. They're renting somewhere. They're bopping, right? I mean, they're just kind of, playing it by ear. The 50-something, they're generally buying a property. What they're doing is in many cases, they're buying a property in some kind of anticipation of retirement use, right? So they're in their 50s. They're going to buy a property maybe in Costa Rica or Belize or somewhere, and they're going to buy it and they're going to use it for vacation. But when they're not there, they're going to rent it out. So they pick up some income that way. But their idea generally is that, as they hit their mid-60s, late 60s, they want to transition. Maybe it's a snowbird kind of thing, right? They're there 6 months out of the year and back up in the States 6 months out of the year. But the idea is they're buying it in anticipation of some use. This new group, who are maybe in their 30s and 40s, they're actually buying for immediate use in many cases. I was just dialoguing with another couple. They have two small children, and they just moved to Ometepe Island and set up a little tourism project, a little kind of bed and breakfast resort on the lake. And so these we're seeing more and more people doing this kind of thing again because they can, right?
Yeah, no, totally understood. One of my neighbors, Jermaine Griggs of Here in Playa, you probably have heard of him, but maybe even if you haven't, he recently last year, just set a pot about literally him and his family. They've literally been traveling from country to country, and that's all they've been doing. And his kids are the same age of my younger three. And it's been interesting watching his journey along this path. But I guess my question, I know, well, everybody knows that I like real estate and it being in multiple different countries, for sure. I'm curious as to what drives your passion at this moment to make sure that not only yourself or your family's taken care of, but why do you're still beating this drum of Central America, South America. It still makes sense to diversify. I mean, you've been doing it for a while. We got to know what's motivating that.
Well, thank you. That's a great question. Somebody asked me that last week. what's your passion? And I said getting the word out, because for me, I find it. I find it disturbing because I talk, obviously I speak at a lot of conferences. I talk to a lot of folks, and I use the conferences that I speak at in person, in public, as an opportunity to talk with the people who are in the audience, right, before or after around the events, right? And what I'm always shocked by is, and I ask this question a lot, I say, how much of your net worth is tied up in the United States? Right. And most of the time people say like all of it. I mean,
right,
I'm kidding,
right.
And what I tell them is, and I give them here's the caveat. I say, and if you own BMW stock on the New York Stock Exchange, that doesn't count, right? Because that's still New York Stock Exchange, right? Yeah, it's BMW, so it's a foreign stock or whatever. But it's not really international diversification. It sort of is, but the answer comes back almost all 100% or 90% or whatever, and the world is a big place, Jay, and it's not just the fact of global diversification, of which I'm a huge fan. It's also what I would call asset class diversification, and right, and cash flow is huge, right? I kind of look at cash flow cycles. This is how I envision cash flow cycles. And your introduction, by the way, I think you did a great job of talking about, looking to the future. How do we prepare for the future when, we don't really know what's going to happen. We hope certain things happen, right?
Wait. Well, hold on. You didn't get your crystal ball in the mail? Come on, man.
Man, I must have returned that by accident.
Totally understood. I got it.
Right? So cash flow cycles, right? So again, the real estate business, I mean, that's monthly cash flow. Those are rents, right? We collect rent every month or whatever, right? So it's a rental cash flow cycle. It's monthly, and then we have annual cycles, which I consider like stocks and bonds. I mean, it's not every year. Some people are day traders, but take that out of it, right? And just say, look, if you have a stock portfolio, your IRAs and bonds and things like that, I mean, that's an annualized kind of cycle. But there's this third cycle that most normal average people do not talk about. And this is it. You want to know what my passion is? My passion is this, that there's this third cycle. It's the generational cycle, cash flow cycle. It's a cycle. It's a cash flow cycle, but it's generational. And the world's wealthiest people, truly the billionaires, the big endowments to Harvard and Princeton and other universities, right? The big money. We're not talking about the top 1%. We're talking about the top 0.001% of the world. They are heavily invested in timber, because timber works on generational cash flow cycles. It's a cycle most people, can't get their brain around. Why would I want to own, for example, teak? Back in 1999, Jay, I went to Panama. I bought a cattle pasture, and I had a forestry company plant it with teak in 1999. And I remember I was in the Rotary Club outside of Washington, D.C., a little town outside of D.C., and the guys and ladies at the club would just kind of tease me, where are you going, Cobb? I'm going to Panama. Where'd you get back from? You missed a meeting last week. Where were you? I was in Panama. I'm planting 100 acres of teak trees. And they would kind of look at me with like this, like, you got to be kidding me. And I'd say, yeah, it's 25 years. And they're like, wait a minute. You planted teak trees in Panama. They're going to take 25 years to harvest. And my answer was this, Jay. I simply said to them, I said, look, in 25 years, I'm either going to need the money and I'm going to be really glad I did this. Or in 25 years, I'm not going to need the money and I'm going to be really glad I did this. It's been I mean, this was 1999. It's been 19 years. We just had a group go visit the plantation this past weekend. A couple times a year, we take trips out there. The trees are giant, tall teak trees now. We're going to cut them down in 6 or 7 years. And you know what? I'm really glad I did this.
Well, okay. So let's talk about this for a second. There's a couple of concepts that you mentioned, and I want to make sure that everybody feels like they can participate, because you mentioned billionaires.
Yeah.
Then you mentioned decades of waiting. And then you said, I'm just going to call it wood. You're like,
yeah.
And there's a lot of people right now who are going, I don't understand. Because either A, they're like, I'm not a billionaire. And okay, I get that I plan to be around 25 years, but really? Like, how does that work? What happens to me in the meantime? How does this really work? I know that's one of them. And then they're really going, but we're going paperless. What do you mean? I don't understand. So you're going to have to break that down for us. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and I'm glad that you are enjoying what you are hearing thus far. But here's one of the things that's really important. One of the most important things that you can do is get started. One of the things that I've said before, and I say again, once you get started, stay started. But more importantly, there can be lots of roadblocks to getting started. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove one of those roadblocks for you and make it a little bit easier. Because the thing that I don't want to stop you is thinking, do I need a local number? How about a long distance number? Or should it be 800? How on earth am I going to make that happen so that people can contact me as I'm out there building my business, making my cash flow grow, but most importantly, understanding that it doesn't have to be difficult. Many of you may know, but if you don't, there's a company out there by the name of Grasshopper. And what I want you to do is I want you to go over to trygrasshopper.com/cashflowdiary. Grasshopper is the entrepreneur's phone system. It works like a traditional phone system, but requires no hardware to purchase, no software to install. It's just a number that flat works. So if you are out there building that distributed workforce across many different locations, it's a way for you to still go out there and make your number be unified, simple, easy to use, something we've been using for quite some time. So again, go over to trygrasshopper.com/cashflowdiary. Now, let's get back to the rest of the story.
Okay, sure. Well, the really interesting thing is that timber has largely been the billionaire, investment product because, in order to buy thousands and thousands of acres, you've got to have serious money because you're not doing with all your money. I mean, a lot of these folks have, 5 to 10% of their money tied up in timber, right? So, I mean, if you're going to buy thousands of acres with 10% of your portfolio, you have a pretty big portfolio, right? So it really has been the playground of the billionaire set for a long, long time. And in fact, the British were the first to really do plantation teak in India about 350 years ago. They started teak plantations about 350 years ago in India and Indonesia, and so there's a long history of this. But right, it's been the big institutions and the billionaires that have done it. Well, what I did was I said, well, there's no reason that I have to buy thousands of acres. I said, let me just go buy 100 acres and I'll plant it with teak, and I'll wait the 25 years. There's no like intermediate cash flow. It's sort of like, think about this. I mean, if you have an apartment, like you expect your rent every 30 days, right? And on day 15, right? And on day 15, you can't go collect cash flow because there isn't any until the 30th of the month, right? So with teak, it's just a longer cash flow cycle. It's a 25-year cash flow cycle. So for 25 years, your money is tied up, right? And that's, some people would say, oh, that's horrible. I can't tie my money up for 25 years. My point is just take 10% or 15% of your money and do something like this with it. It doesn't have to be teak timber, but generational cash flow cycle. Take 10, 15, 20% of your investable worth and turn it into generational cash flow cycles. And there's a big plus on this. People sometimes, it's, I need liquidity. I want liquidity. But the fact that it's not liquid is actually a huge advantage for generational wealth stewardship. That's why I use the word generational cash flow cycle, because this money could be for you. I mean, this first harvest in Panama 6-7 years from now, I hope to be alive. I'll be 60 if I make it or whatever. So I'll be alive, and I think and I'll get this first harvest, right? But then we're going to replant it, and 25 more years. Like, I'm probably not going to make that next harvest. Maybe I'll be geezing by then or something. But that's for the kids. That's for the grandkids. And then that harvest gets cut. That money comes out, and the grandkids or the kids or the grandkids then replant it for their kids or their grandkids. And so it is a powerful, powerful generational wealth stewardship tool. And one of the biggest advantages is the fact that it is not liquid. Because here's the thing: like if you have the same amount of money, a few $100,000, $1 million sitting in stocks and bonds, and let's say you have a bunch of BMW stock, right? And you kick the bucket, right? And your kids decide that they want, a Lamborghini and fancy sunglasses and designer purses and all that kind of stuff. Well, they'll just sell your BMW stock and go buy that stuff, right? And all of a sudden the money's squandered. The reason billionaires, the big money families do this is the fact that it's not liquid. And so it is protected for generation after generation after generation. And so, again, you shouldn't do big chunks of money in it, but for some part of your investable net worth, I mean, having things in a generational cycle is just, prudent and wise. And again, it's why the big money folks do it.
And okay, so I'm listening and I'm hearing you, but I also know that there's someone going, but Mike, I don't have billions of anything.
Got it. You can get into teak product and teak investments for 20 grand, 20 to 20 up, right? But
suddenly I hear a whole lot of people just got more interested. Keep going, Mike.
Sorry. Yeah. So for example, a quarter acre of teak in Panama is, it's 20. It's a little under 20 grand, but it's about 20 grand. And bigger parcels in say Nicaragua, you can get a hectare, which is 2.5 acres or more or less, but pretty close to 2.5 acres a hectare, for about 60 grand. And the kinds of ROIs on this is phenomenal. I mean, we're talking about IRRs that are double digit, 11, 12% IRRs. So 60 grand turns into a mill or a mill one or something, in 25 years, 25 years, right? But like it's like, it's real money, it's big money, and again, with a small piece of what you're playing with, there's a lot of wisdom in changing the monthly cash flow cycle to a generational cash flow cycle. And the other jump, by the way, from monthly to annual, like I take some of my money and I put it into stocks and bonds. That's a fairly easy jump for a lot of people because it's what 99.99% of America does, right? They invest in stocks and bonds. But this generational one it's a whole different kind of thinking process, right? But it's out there. We just have to hear about it. And now your folks are, they're getting a chance to hear about it.
So when I'm approaching an opportunity, there's basically two questions that I ask. How do I finance it? How do I manage it?
Right.
The numbers you're talking about, the 20 to 60, I'm like, okay, cool. That's an easy number to deal with. That's not like, oh, okay. It's not exorbitantly expensive to where I go, oh my goodness, never going to be able to come up with that. I was like, oh no,
right.
That's all right, cool. No problem. That part's now easy. But Mike, I know nothing about trees. I kill everything that's remotely green anywhere near me. You don't want it. I don't even do well. I mean, dogs at least remind you that they're hungry, and I'm still not that good at it. So come on.
Hey, you have kids. Are they doing okay?
I have a wife. She keeps them alive, and that's how it works.
Yeah, that's what I always say. Thank God there are women in the world, because otherwise the human race would have ended a long time ago.
Exactly. So how does, I mean, obviously there's there's a maintenance cycle for 25 years. There's got to be like, how does the initial investment also pay for the people who do this, or how does that? I don't even know. There's just so many questions going through my head.
Yeah. And one thing, let me just say that if for anyone listening, if they're interested in this specific topic about timber and teak and stuff like that, we have a great resource guide that's all about teak and timber. And in fact, we set up a special email address just so we can see who's coming in from the program, because we like to know where people, heard about us. And CashFlowDiary at ecidevelopment.com, CashFlowDiary@ecidevelopment.com. We'll send you this teak guide, this teak and timber guide. It's not just about teak, but to answer your question specifically, when I planted, one of the things I did, one of the reasons I went to Panama so often in 1998 and 1999 was to interview and then hire a forestry management company, and the company we hired there is a company called Heo Forestal, and I don't know anything about it either, Jay. What do I know about teak and timber and nothing. But I'm a pretty humble guy when it comes to I don't know what I don't know, and so I searched out the best firms in Panama and interviewed 3 of them, and ended up selecting the firm that I did because they were the company that all the other, maybe not all, many of the other forestry companies came to for their seedlings. That they were the company that went out in the woods and found the wild teak trees, and then figured out how to make them cross-pollinate and stuff like that to come up with the absolute best seedlings, and then the other forestry companies hired or bought their seedlings from them. So when I heard that, I was like, you know what? That's the company for me. And so we hired them, and they've been managing our plantation there for 19 years, really well. So the answer to your question is I don't know very much about it either, but, we'll hire really smart, talented people to do that. And then in terms of how does the monetary issue work? Yeah, that's all been paid for up front in Panama. What we're doing in Nicaragua is a little bit different. They're actually there's a small maintenance fee. I think it's $250 a year. I can't remember what it is, but it's kind of a de minimis number. It takes care of property taxes and maintenance of your parcel as well. But there and you get the thinning proceeds. So you actually do start to see some cash flow. I think it's in year 12, 13 when the second thinning happens. And again, there's lots of detail there, and we'll certainly provide it to anyone who wants it. But these opportunities really kind of they're well thought out. They're time tested. Again, the British have been doing this for 350 years. And we've now got, almost 2 decades, 19 years of firsthand experience in Panama. So, again, time tested and people ask, well, how are your trees doing, Mike? And I'm like, they're average. which is just fine. They're average. It's not on you, right? They're average. I mean, you got 100 acres. You're gonna have some bigger, some smaller, but like on average, they're average. They're doing what they're supposed to do, and I think that's really the key, right? I mean, just lay it out there and let it happen.
So let me ask you here, because I start to think about strategy now, because there's a couple of things going through my head. The first thing was like, okay, at those numbers, why don't I do one of those every year for 25 years? And then for 25 more, after I've done that for 25 years, every year I got a nice big crop of trees coming. That's one thing that goes through my head. Is that the strategy that is often employed here?
Well, it interesting. That's my strategy.
I see.
Yeah, right. I mean, and so we did the Panama thing, and then we got busy with our development projects. I mean, we've built 2 communities, one our Gran Pacifica community with, homes, condos, golf course. We basically built a small town by the sea. And then in Belize, we've done the same thing with our Grand Bayman. And so for kind of maybe 15 years in the middle there, I didn't kind of, stay on top of it and plant more every year. But 4 years ago, I was like, yeah, this is silly. So we have been planting now every year for the last 4 years. Well, this is our 4th year, and plan to continue to plant every year from now on. because it's a great strategy. Why wouldn't you do it? And so we plant and then we offer it. If it sells, great. If it doesn't sell, then it attributes back to the company. As the thinnings start and as the cash flow happens on that 24-year cycle. So, we're going to continue to do it, Jay. I think your point's well taken. Right. Why wouldn't you do it? And the other really cool thing, and I mentioned this because it's generational, for people who have children and grandchildren, you can actually buy the smaller parcels in the name of a kid or a grandkid. And if I don't. Right, and I think the gift tax exclusion is about 14,000 or something, right? So you can give a grandkid $13,000 or $14,000. There's no tax to them, right? So instead of giving them $13,000, buy them a small parcel of teak right into their name, right? And in 25 years, that parcel's worth a heck of a lot more. I can't do the math on that one off the top of my head, but anyway.
Sure. But you know what I was thinking? You know how sometimes kids get all excited for Christmas and then, grandma gives them that, ugly sweater. I can imagine, I'm trying to imagine a child opening up their gift and going, trees? You gave me trees? I don't, they won't understand it today, but I can see their reaction right now not being the most excited. But I think later they would be, though.
Well, you know what you could do? You could throw in a trip to Panama. So it's not only the trees; it's a chance to go visit them and take a ride on the Panama Canal, or do a zip line, or go see a volcano, or learn to surf, or do whatever. Right. So you could tie it into some fun stuff too, I think. But yeah, why not, man? I mean, right?
I just think that just sounds interesting to me. So as you guys continue to grow, continue to develop, what was it specifically about Nicaragua that said, okay, now it's time to go there? Like, something had to happen. I mean, you didn't pick that randomly is what I'm saying, and there was a reason. What was it?
Well, believe it or not, that's an interesting question. It wasn't totally random, but it wasn't really on our radar screen either. We were developing in Belize. I bought my first condo there in '94, and we bought a small resort in '98, and we actually had started a little mortgage company there as well. So I've been involved in Belize, by 2000, 6 years, right? And we were looking for larger development parcels to basically have a clean palette. We wanted a clean palette so we could do, what we wanted to do, and in terms of the delivery of community specifically. And we started looking in Belize and Honduras, Costa Rica. And an associate of ours was living in Nicaragua, and he said, "Do you mind if I look around here too?" And we said, "Sure, Kurt. Go ahead, look around." And he called us back, a month or so later, and he said, "I found this beautiful property. It's got so many things going for it. It's close to Managua. The coastline is beautiful." No. He says, "But there's only one problem." And then we're like, all right, here comes the other shoe, right? He goes, "All right, Kurt, what's what's the problem?" He goes, "It's really, really big." We're like, all right, how big? He said, "It's 2,500 acres. It's 3.5 miles of Pacific coastline. And it's a monster property, right? You're in California. I don't know what 3.5 miles of Pacific coastline would
Never seen it before. Right? Never seen it.
Right? And so we're like, all right, Kurt, how much is it? And he goes, "Well, it's a lot more than you wanted to spend, but it's $2.5 million." And we're like, "Kurt, we'll be down in a couple of weeks." We want it.
You're not getting that. You don't want to know what you're going to get for $2.5 million over here.
Right. You get a quarter acre lot on the Pacific for $2 million, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Right. So, but it was, it was remote. I mean, it was an hour from Managua. It had 11 kilometers of dirt road. It had no electric, no nothing. So we came in and we put in the electric, and we put in water systems. We were the very first fiber to the home community in all of Central America. We put fiber to every home. We've built, again, condos and homes, and we built a golf course, and we've built a little town by the sea, which is pretty cool. So anyway, and now we've got this 2,500 acres. We've got lots of extra land, and that's where we're developing the teak timber right now there as well. And we've hired a professional agronomist to come in and manage our teak program. And the folks
hold on, a professional what? You just
agronomist.
Never.
Agronomist.
Can you spell that? Yeah, I mean, come on, you're making up words again. All right, what is an agronomist?
Agronomist, yeah.
I'm like, I know someone else had the same question. It's like, whoa, what was that?
Yeah.
What do they do?
He's a forestry guy, and he's full-time on staff, and he's
a professional tree hugger, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, a tree planter, tree cutter. I don't know if he's a tree hugger or not.
Oh, he cuts them.
Yeah, he cuts them. It's a management. It's his forestry management.
Got it.
It's funny, Jay, because occasionally I get somebody who gives me a little bit of a hard time about, the whole, cutting down the forests and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and,
I was
and I'm just sort of like,
that.
I've planted hundreds of acres of teak trees. I said, I've done my part for the world. What have you done? You gotta be kidding me,
true,
right?
Actually,
and we continue to plant. I mean, we continue to plant new teak every year, and sure, we're going to harvest them in 25 years, but we're going to replant, and that really is, incredibly powerfully beneficial to the environment as well. That's sort of a side benefit. We don't really get into that very much, but I think people can feel really, really good when they plant, a hectare or 2.5 acres of teak trees on cattle pasture, right? They're really making a significant and meaningful difference to the environment by doing that. So again, it's got some nice side benefit as well.
Yeah, I'm liking the more you keep talking, the more I keep liking this particular strategy. I mean, one of my personal reasons for being in business was to make sure that I leave an inheritance for my children's children. And I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. This is a way to do that without it getting interrupted, because they have to wait. They can't mess it up. I'm like, this is
right.
A good idea.
Boy, Jay, you said it right, man. You absolutely said it right there. You said they can't mess it up. They have to wait. And that, to me, is the biggest positive benefit of the illiquidity of this investment. They can't mess it up. They can't get their hands on it. They can't do stupid stuff with it. You hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, that's what was going through my head. I'm liking this more. Now, for those people who want to pick up more information, find out more about what you guys got going on, what's going to be the best way for them to track you down and figure it out?
Absolutely. CashFlowDiary at ecidevelopment.com. We'll make a note of that, and if they end up purchasing any property products from us, and they come through this website, we'll remember to take half their closing costs off the table. So good incentive for folks to at least come and visit, get the free downloads. I mean, we have a consumer resource guide for property ownership overseas. It's very generic. It's worldwide. So if you're thinking about property in Thailand or an apartment in Paris or something in Mexico or Belize or anywhere south of the border, this consumer resource guide is a phenomenal kit for you. It's a free download, and then the teak timber download as well. So in the subject line, just write downloads or something. We'll send the links to them. CashFlowDiary at ecidevelopment.com.
Excellent. I definitely appreciate that. And I definitely appreciate you continuing to spread the message, get the word out. I mean, you've been doing it for a while. You continue to do it. And there's something to be said about a man on a mission who's absolutely focused and still making it happen. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time to share with us your knowledge, your wisdom, and your insight again here at the Cashflow Diary, sir.
Jay, thanks for having me again, and I look forward to hearing from a lot of the listeners and seeing if something makes sense for them. We'll certainly be happy to help them get involved.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means send that email to CashFlowDiary at ecidevelopment.com, because like I know, you got a little bit excited more about trees than you've ever been excited. You're like, oh my gosh, this is such a great idea, and it's accessible for so many of us in so many different ways. Here's the thing. You're going out there, you're building your business for a reason, but now let's start focusing on building that legacy. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.